All right. Well, we want to welcome.
Wait, the button is not working.
Hi there. My name's Arol McFadden. I'm the lead pastor at Mission Manuka.
Yeah, my name's Erik. I'm the campus pastor over in the Morris campus. But this past weekend, I got to be in Manuka, and that was a blast.
That's awesome. And I'm not even going to fake it. We already said all that we're about to say. We just got cut off. So some of you are going to see this and go, wait, that sounds familiar. It sounds familiar because it was just a couple minutes ago. But for everyone else, this is brand new, fresh stuff. I was out of state. I was not in town for this past weekend when we covered the issue of rest. And that's something that, honestly, I don't think I'm great at. I think that that's something I struggle with. But it's interesting just hearing. I had a chance to listen to the Manuka podcast or the Manuka stream and listen to the sermon, and I was both encouraged and convicted in hearing all about rest, because I really do feel like this is one of those litmus tests on how well do you do at self-discipline. You're not disciplined if you're abusing this category in your life, the area of rest. And how you set yourself up to do that well, how you set yourself up not to do that too much, so where it veers into laziness. But man, finding that balance and that rhythm is difficult.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to justify too. I need to work. It's good to work. Blah blah blah. Or I need to rest. And I think you could talk yourself into being lazy by saying you're good at rest.
Yeah,
and you could talk yourself into being a good workaholic and justify all. And so it's like, well, how do we not be our own judge to say, well, I'm doing right, and we have both opposite opinions on what that actually looks like.
And the tough thing too is that every human is different. So what one person what they need for a total disconnect and rest is different from the other guy. Like the whole idea of Sabbath, like that's what we see built into Scripture as far as this opportunity, as you pointed out, of hundreds of years of slavery, and then all of a sudden God says, no, you have a day where you don't do any of that. You're not working yourself to the bone. You're taking a rest. You're enjoying time with family, enjoying time with the Lord. You're pausing the rat race of life, and that's something that we see fast forward hundreds of years. So, consolidated that into a part of their life that it became it was legalistic. It's like it was oppressive as far as like, you can't do this, you can't on this day. And Jesus came in and kind of like reset all that and corrected that. As like, you guys missed the point of what this was intended to be all along.
It's interesting. It seems like one of the things they hated Jesus the most for was breaking the Sabbath. Even if he's like healing someone or doing some amazing miracle.
Yeah.
They didn't like when he said he was God. But besides that, the Sabbath, yeah. I mean, that was a hot button for them. And that doesn't even mean they were good at rest. Because for them, if they weren't trusting in God, they weren't doing it with good motives. They were almost stressed about how to do it because of the layers of rules they had put on God's original. So it is an interesting thing to think about.
They were really anal retentive about their goal wasn't rest. It was, I want to make sure that I'm checking the right boxes in order to feel like I'm doing what God's calling me to do and how I'm living, but they weren't living. They were more, and they were also imposing that on everyone else. Like, again, I was just talking about this, that 50 years ago or so, Christians were saying, not only do we not do anything on Sunday, but maybe go to church. We don't swim. We don't. We're not going to mow the lawn. All that is like off the table, and I think that the balance is. I think that part of that is your own conviction. I think to say, look, for me, I don't need another chore to do today, and the lawn is a chore. Gardening is a chore. Whereas someone else is like, man, that is like the most restful thing I can do, to be able to just disconnect and not have to talk to anyone and just see something productive happen that's not stressing me out like what's happening the other 5 or 6 days of my week. That's like a rest for them. And so, but how do you do that? Like, what's the way that you can set yourself up to rest well?
To me, I feel like it has to come out of your priorities. And so, like, if you don't value family, go ahead and work 7 days a week. 2 all-nighters, you know. If you value family, then you're going to have to figure out how to, like, give time. In our small group, we're in one of the mission small groups, and we do the discussion on the sermon. And so we got into talking about, one, how people rest differently. Like, I like to play, and I feel relaxed and refreshed. Mm-hmm. My wife, she'd feel, like, busy and tired. She wants to, like, sit. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, I don't want to sit. You know, I'll sit when I have to. So, and then we also talked about just how, well, I forgot the other thing we talked about.
But it was so good.
It was so good. You
Man.
should have been there. Yeah.
See, that's why I need to join your small group so I can get the nuggets that you're going to forget the next day.
Yeah. It's hard to remember.
No, it is. But I actually...
we talked about how there's not enough time to do everything. So you could say, well, I want to take a day off, or I want to prioritize my family, or I want to prioritize time with God, or whatever it is. But there's just not enough time to do everything that we want. And so we were talking about, there's a book that a pastor wrote, and he called it Choosing to Cheat. And he was just saying, there's not enough time to do everything. What are you going to cheat? At least cheat what you want rather than on accident. And the whole idea is, like, put your time into your priorities. Yeah. And at least your leftovers, your lowest rung, versus your time just got taken from you and your priorities are way out of whack. So I think that's what I mean by I think it's healthy rest. It actually starts with good priorities.
Mm-hmm. I was telling you this just a couple minutes ago, but my family line, I come from a lot of workaholics. My dad was a hardcore workaholic in ministry as a pastor. So what I watched growing up was a very busy, involved person. And I processed that as a kid as nothing but positive. I'm like, that's Dad. He's killing it. He's supposed to do. And he came from a mom who was not in ministry, but was equally just driven to work, working hard. And if she sat down for 5 minutes, she felt like she was lazy. My grandpa could sit down forever watching whatever was on television, no issues. But my grandma, she had to be doing something. I remember her saying, like, you know, I asked her what she did that day. And she said, scrubbing the floors for some old people. Well, my grandma was 80. And like, these were like people in their 60s that she was working for. I'm like, Grandma. And she's like, well, you know, you have to be working. And so I remember I kind of came into that mindset that I'm constantly going, constantly working in order for that. I almost like that equals good. That equals not lazy. And I remember after saying yes to an outside of my work week obligation for the third or fourth time that Julie told me, every time you say yes to one of those things, you're saying no to us. Every time you say yes to something, you're automatically saying no to something else. And it's still a thing that I struggle with, being able to know when is it right to prioritize this work thing that's saying no to something else as a priority. When's it okay to rest from this? And when is it right to say this is just a busy season? Because again, sometimes it's seasonal, you know, where things are just more harried and, you know, intense in one particular season, and you know that going into it. A lot of people's work looks that way. You know, you're working an outage, or you're working in this particular selling season, and so you know that it's going to be a time where it's going to be over and above the norm as far as your busyness. Yeah.
Think about your pace and offering your best to whatever you're going to do. I don't want to give my family, like, my most tired, cranky moment because I've run myself dry. I also don't want to be, you know, bad at work or any other responsibility. And so, man, if I don't, like, get some rest, mentally, sleep, you know, all of it, spiritually, like, be recharged and refreshed to give my best to friendship, marriage, parenting, work, all of it, then I'm not going to be who I am to begin with.
What's your ideal rest? Like, if you could have, let's just say you had a day every week where this happened, what would be a good description of, like, that's a restful day for Erik Swanson?
I like to play. I don't care too much what it is. I'd be outside a lot. I love to be outside. I would have some meat on the smoker. Sometimes I love to eat smoked meat, but I think I like cooking it almost as much as I like eating it. That's like a hobby. That's not a chore, which is good. Cherry, you're cooking again? You know, she's eating that up. So I think home, family, play, barbecue, some mixture of that.
Yep.
You know, if we're on vacation, my favorite vacation days are hiking, busy, active. So how about you?
A lot of the same. Well, at least the hiking part. For me, my favorite day of the week is Friday. And so what I love about that is I wake up, I get the kids off to school, and then Julie and I are able to just kind of enjoy the day. And we basically, that factors into we're going to go someplace and go for a walk. A state that had awesome national parks, it would be a hike. But we just go for a walk. And that's fine. I mean, it's Illinois awesome. And so we do that. And then being able to enjoy good food, and then when the kids get home, being able to, whether it's watching a movie or if it's a board game or whatever, it's just like, I love gathering with friends. Like those things kind of fill up the tank. Or even just being able to go into the garage and, work on a painting or something where I'm not talking to anyone. Like, man, sometimes that is like the best reboot for me. But, the spiritual side of it, and you touched on this in the sermon, like it's more than just ceasing, and it's more than even just investing in high priorities with family or friends or whatever. There's a spiritual component above and beyond those as far as a connecting piece between you and God. What does that look like?
Well, I think you can be off and not rest. You can stop working and not be at rest, especially mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so we were just saying, rest and trust in God go hand in hand. And kind of like you were saying, we should be better at this. People that don't know Jesus, church people, Christian people, saved people should be better at actually relaxing. There's plenty of things we can stress about, but at the end of the day, if we really trust in the Lord, we can relax and actually relax. We can be off and not, still spin in the back of our mind as much as someone who doesn't have peace with themselves or eternal peace with God. And so I think it comes down to really trusting the Lord, which is what I think he was getting at with the Sabbath and in all the ways that he leads his people to trust that for them, that he's with them, he's going to provide for them, so they can actually rest. So I think that's the key.
That kind of factors into just like from the work side of things. If I feel like I come from a poorer background or a time or season of their life where they had a lot taken away from them, and they get that much more amped up of I got to work hardcore, because if I don't take every overtime opportunity, then I'm not going to have enough, or my family's not going to have enough. And so they kind of live in that desperation piece, miss out on the peace that God wants for them. And that's you talked about the manna concept, as far as God providing the manna. And my favorite go-to on that is John Ortberg, who would talk about the manna principle, that God was training the kids growing up in the wandering of the wilderness for that 40 years, so that when they would go into the land, they'd be that much more ready to trust God. And so the training was, I'm going to give you just enough for a day. You're going to have enough food out there for a day, and if you collect more than that, it's going to rot. It's going to have maggots. But when you end your day of the supply that I provided you, that you gathered, you will be bankrupt. You're going to be bankrupt of everything that you had, and you're going to be able to put your head on your pillow, trusting that the next day I'm going to have enough for you. And you wake up the next day and you open up the window of your tent, and sure enough, tents have windows.
They could. I'm not sure about their tents.
Double pane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you open it up. Oh. And sure enough, God had provided again. And so that you do that day after day, and all of a sudden you start to realize, no, God's going to give me enough for one more day. And so, and these guys are rolling with the idea that on top of that, there's a day of rest, And so I love the fact that they could trust God, and that he was trying to condition that in that whole process. And to this day, it's not like, well, we're in modern times, we really need to trust ourselves. No, we still are called to trust God and organize and order our work week and our life in such a way that we have that built in. And I think you're right. If Christians did that, we would be the most peace-filled people. That would be not problems on the planet. We would be hitting some of the same problems. You hit a recession, it's going to hit Christians just as much as a non-Christian. But all that training to trust God, that we hit that, we're like, okay, what? You totally thought of something. Is this you using your discerning gift of like, maybe I should not say it?
Yeah.
Man, I can't wait to hear what it is. But so I think that the the other side of that, though.
I was thinking though, like with the manna, what's interesting to take extra was before the Sabbath. Funny, but we can set ourselves, we can plan, we can work for rest. So like my wife, if she wants to like relax, be down and be off and and rest, she wants the house clean. Today's the day off, let's all relax. And the house is a mess. She's like, well, let's pick up the floor, let's vacuum, And so we've learned like, hey, let's do some of that work before our time off so that we can actually rest. So it's interesting, he would tell them to do that work before they would plan for rest. And I think we can do that to a degree too. Even think about planning for a vacation. It takes a lot of, making plans and booking things and all the things that it takes from your work standpoint to you're going and what you're doing. And that's like an investment of time so that you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And our whole life should not revolve around rest.
Right.
But if it's a priority that we want to do good for our own well-being and for the sake of whoever we live with, our family that we get to lead, then we actually put some intention into making that a good experience.
Okay, so we kind of hit on vocational or chore work and the rest from that, but let's talk about the two areas of actual physical rest, like sleep, and these are like pockets of rest, like a daily pocket of rest. Rather than even just having that one day where we're having an opportunity to take off and worship God, be with our family, chill out, but the daily pockets of rest in physical sleep and then time with God, specific daily time with God. Rest-wise, like sleep-wise, how are you at sleep? How disciplined are you?
Okay, I'm okay. I
Yeah.
when they do go to sleep.
Right.
And I'm like, I wake up feeling fresh.
I can be empathetic with that because I had insomnia for like 2 or 3 years. I would have like this traumatic event that I'd replay in my brain over and over again. Every time we go to sleep, it was awful. I get just garbage sleep every night, like 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. It was terrible. So like someone who struggles with sleep, who just desires rest, but they physically can't, their brain is just nonstop. I do know Christians that have been really helped with medication to get them to sleep. And I'm like, man, I'd have to do that because you go into the next day or like if you go into a week where you're consistently not getting good sleep, that just affects everything. But as far as I'm concerned, I try to be disciplined. Julie is like a same time every night. She's so consistent. I'm jealous of her consistency, but I'm constantly talking myself into, oh man, now I've got time to do whatever I want. I could do one more thing. And that's poor discipline. It's not setting yourself up for success. So but once I get to sleep, I'm good. Yeah. I think that's something though that I would like to grow in that and being better at it, because I think I've heard you say before, you've read leadership articles and blogs on the importance of sleep. Yeah. And that's something that, you're just setting yourself up for success if you do that. You're setting yourself up for failure when you don't. And as far as that other pocket of rest on a daily basis of time with God, that's something that a lot of Christians struggle with. As I've talked with Christians, they're like, even in the questions from the small group this week, that's one thing we're like, that's one area where I probably would be the weakest, is that consistent daily time with God, having a pocket where I'm resting from other things that I'd be doing. What's been like your life hacks that have helped you with that, or areas where you find yourself to be weak?
I think life hack wise, a huge game changer for me was realizing that is rest. So for a long time, that was a chore. That was a to-do. I'm supposed to sit with God.
Christians are supposed to do this.
I'm supposed to read the Bible. I'm supposed to sit still or pray or, and so at best I'm checking that off my list. Like, oh, I got that done.
Yeah.
I don't know how or when, but eventually I started realizing this is good for me and I enjoy it. And there's days I read the Bible and pray and it doesn't feel magical, or there's days I'm praying after I read the Bible. God, I went to Bible college and I don't even know what that meant. Don't tell Arol. I'm still confused on parts of it.
He told me.
But there's plenty of other times where I'm like, man, that was rest for my soul, Jesus talks about. Yeah. My circumstances didn't change, but my perspective did, or my faith did. So, and so eventually, sometime, I started realizing Like I look forward to that time. Mm-hmm. So it's not a chore to check off a list. That makes it unrestful to start with. It's like I missed out if I didn't take God up on that invitation.
Yeah.
And so even that perspective in what that time is supposed to be made it more restful for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that idea of connecting, that understanding what rest is in the Bible really comes close to what the Bible talks about with shalom, that peace. That you're setting aside this time to have this connection between you and the Father, and you're reading His Word, and so this is His way of communicating to you. You get a chance to talk to Him, and there's something about that brings you back into that shalom, where, hey, things are rightly ordered. My connection with God and my thoughts are now realigned, and I'm set up to go into the rest of the day or the rest of the week or whatever. And that I think is one thing my small group was talking about, is how that we find that to be something that impacts everyday life so much better than not doing that at all. If I'm a Christian, I could go to the doctor and hear that I've got cancer. I could get fired from a job. I could have a relationship that goes sideways, just as much as my atheist neighbor. The difference with going with God and being set up with those times where you're connecting with God is you're hitting the same garbagey things, but you have not conditioned your brain to think everything is on. I'm the one who's making all the decisions in my world, and everything in my world really is on my shoulders. Mm-hmm. That daily pocket of rest, of time with God in His Word and in prayer, sets your mind to say, no, this is on Him. Mm-hmm. I'm following Him. So that when I get to the relational issues or the work issues or the health issues, it's through the filter that I've already established that day. God's in control. I got peace from the fact that I'm connected to Him. And that gives you rest even in the garbage situations. And so I've noticed in my life, if I've gone through a season where I'm not faithful in that area and I hit those difficulties, man, they hit so much harder. And it's so much heavier because I've conditioned my brain to think this is all on me. And that time with God is just again, reorients you to where your brain needs to be.
I was wanting to ask you to share something that you share with me, but when I was researching on rest, meditation and all this, and the different ways to meditate, I read this article from Mayo Clinic about you can meditate by emptying your brain, mm-hmm. by focusing on your breathing, by praying, by reading sacred scripture. It doesn't say the Bible, just any sacred scripture, or mantras. There's different stretching. So it might be a walk, it might be sitting, but mm-hmm. mantra made me think of something that I know you've really enjoyed, mm-hmm. Of kind of a repeated prayer. Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So there's, and I'm the worst ambassador or salesperson for this app, but you don't even need this app to do it. But there's this thing called the Pause app, like using your remote control. And it's basically something that you set on your phone to once, twice, or 3 times a day, just kind of sends you a notification that's time to pause. And I think that what you're supposed to do is go to their app and read one of their devotionals. But I never read the directions, so I don't know. All I know, or what I use for it, is this. I simply, whenever that's set for in the day before I get to the office, sometime either on my way home or after I get home, it goes, time to pause. And in that moment, I just repeat for 60 seconds, you are God and I am not. You are God and I am not. You are God. And I just repeat that over and over again.
And God really needs to hear that.
It does. It's just, there's something, oh my gosh, as simple a statement as that is, mm-hmm. that is, I feel like that's renewing my mind. That's the renewing of my mind back to its factory setting of knowing He's God, I'm not. And so when you take that time in your devotions, that's ultimately what your takeaway, even if you come to a passage like, I have no idea what's happening in the book of Numbers right here. Or I don't see how practical this is for me and my job at Amazon. Mm-hmm. This is like, whatever. The net message time and time again is God is God. I am not. I'm not the divine. And that gives me so much more peace and objectivity and capacity to manage the rest of my day.
Yep.
And yeah, that's rest. One of the questions that we had was, how do you know if Or is there such a thing even as too much rest?
Yeah, is it possible?
Is it possible?
To get too much rest?
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, the first thing I think of is when our kids were little, it would be like they're too tired to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we stayed out too late. We pushed them too hard. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Why don't they just go to sleep? And they're like 2 years old or 1 year old or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question. But what comes to mind is this oxymoron kind of relationship with, is it possible to rest too? If you need rest, you know.
Yeah.
One time I came home from a college semester and like I procrastinated, so I had to do too much in too little time. And I slept for like 15 straight hours.
Yeah.
Like without even waking up.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I was like, well, I guess I needed it.
Yeah.
I'd recharge that battery. So,
But at the same time, okay, so here's the thing. With all my kids, every single one of them, all four, like, first it started with Micah. After you get out of that, you know, infant stage of like, man, they're just not sleeping through the night. Eventually they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wake up at 5 a.m. and they run to your bedroom like, Dad, 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 Dad. And you're just like, when is he just going to sleep in?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when is he going to sleep in and give us a full night's sleep? And then they become teenagers. And then they learn. And at least my kids, like, all of a sudden, like, Saturday morning, if there wasn't something going on, they could, if we didn't wake them up, I think they'd still be sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, when did that happen? But there is a point, okay, that's too much rest.
Yeah.
You know, there's that you're getting into a point where you're not living life if you're spending so much time just, I don't know, checked out.
Without trying to oversimplify it, I guess my mind says what too much would be laziness.
Mm-hmm.
And probably you're self-justifying.
Yeah.
Well, I need this. I need more. I need more time off work. I need, you know, what I need to sleep in later. And because Scripture talks a lot about work,
Mm-hmm.
and we're called to work, and we're called to work hard, not only at our job, but at being a man after God's own heart, at leading our family, you know, at serving the church, just in life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think if we're, you know, taking it too easy on too many things at the excuse of rest,
Mm-hmm.
then we're either lazy, we might need to get some help, you know, with mental, you know, talking to someone or whatever that would take to figure out, why do I either chronically feel tired or chronically feel unmotivated? Because there's probably more there than just, I need some rest.
I think also, like, if you find yourself checking out of things that you're called to do, providing an income or income for your family, or serving in some way, shape, or form, or even showing up at church. Like, I remember, I think you talked about this too, a little in when you're in the sermon. If not, maybe this is a different conversation. But I just remember being at Moody, and all of a sudden, like, guys just, yeah, Jesus wants me to sleep in today,
Mm-hmm.
not go to church. He really cares about my rest. And you could totally talk yourself into that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never, I guess I'm never shocked at the human brain's capacity to talk yourself out of the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
time and time again. It happens all the time. And so you can, in the name of rest, if you've set your week up in such a way that you roll into Sunday and you're talking yourself into sleeping, and this is like not just that was an anomaly, but this is a common thing,
Mm-hmm.
then there's something going wrong in the rest of your week, and perhaps either you're being lazy and there's too much rest, or you haven't set yourself up with the proper amount of rest during the week so that you're rolling into your one day of doing what God's called you to do, which is to gather with God's people, and you're checking out of that in the name of an extra hour or two of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing that for me, just on for a lot of people who do struggle though with that daily devotion time, if you're anything like me, it's got to be the same time, and you got to be just hardcore diligent about doing it. If because I've just gone through a season where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do it right first in the morning. I'm going to do it at a different point, and I find that that's just terrible for me. I'm super inconsistent with it. If that's my MO, for me, it's got to be the kids get off to school and I go off into the back patio and I sit down and I do my devotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that, when I do that, it's like, why am I not doing this every single day? And when I don't do it, I see exactly what happens as far as I just get out of the habit.
Mm-hmm.
It's far more difficult for me not to be the same time every
Mm-hmm.
day. Do you have a time of day when is it set time for you, or is it more open-ended?
I've done a little bit of both. I have also, like you, have the most success and the best pace at it when it's like, hey, this is my regular routine. I know for some, maybe that's a personality, a wiring, but I really do feel like for most people, if they've kind of got this is my thing, this is my time, this is my chair, my place, you know, whether that be first thing, I feel like most people have the most success when it's on the front side of their day.
Yeah.
But I know people that have done my lunch break. That's,
Yeah.
You know,
They go out of their truck and they're doing their devotions.
So there's no one way to do it.
Yeah.
But that routine is huge. It was huge for me.
I'd say that if you're doing it on the front side, if you've got kids, that's an automatic, that's an easy, you know, you're getting your kids off to school and then immediately do it right there. For me, I'm a kind of a news junkie where I watch news and then I get sick of it and it ruins the rest of my day. So I get through a season of not watching news in the morning. When I have that devotional time before I watch the news, it's a game changer for me. And again, it just gives me a filter to see the world through. And especially during an election season, I think that's a smart move. If you don't have kids, though, you don't have that automatically, you know, first thing. I would just say, if your day is busy, just set your alarm for 30 minutes before you currently are. Your body doesn't need that 30 minutes as much as your soul does. And so I would just say, setting, you know, 15, 30 minutes, however much time that you need to spend some time in God's Word, reading a chapter, and then just talking to God about it, talking to God about what's going on in your life. Your soul, what your soul can glean from that 30-minute earlier time frame of starting your day is just, it absolutely is no comparison to what you're losing in 30 minutes of sleep.
And we're realizing that that's rest.
Yeah.
So you might wake up earlier,
yeah,
but get more rest.
Absolutely.
If you spend it with God.
Yeah. No, but I felt like this was, didn't get a chance to talk to anyone else at church outside of the people in my small group, but I feel like this is an area that all of us can grow in. And I found it, just as a pastor, I found it convicting and challenging and encouraging. And I'm stoked to see us as a church just fleshing this out more intentionally going forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that you have on your mind as far as rest?
No.
Yeah. I don't either. We're going to rest from this conversation.
Yeah, sounds good.
No, but our hope for this is just to get a chance to revisit these times of whatever we picked up at church on the weekend. We want to see that momentum and that just the impact continue on. And so we hope that you find this helpful either on your lunch break or later on in the day or later on in the week. And yeah, we love you, church. We can't wait to see you this weekend.